The debate on foreign affairs and trade, and if we could have the movers of composite number 1, which embraces motions number 49 and a number of other motions. Who's moving? Labour Youth? Chloe? Sorry? Can't hear you, Chloe. Just move the move.
Okay, comrades. The spirit of this motion, I think, ties in very well to trade unionism, which is a concept that we're all familiar with, and one that I think drives the politics of the majority of the people in this room, hopefully. And trade unionism, to that principle, is so fundamental, the concept of solidarity and internationalism and standing up for what is right and what is just. Our movement was founded on the principle of withdrawing our labour when there is an injustice taking place. Now, on an international level, what we have the opportunity to do here is to withdraw capital when capital is facilitating the oppression of people. And I think, for those who aren't familiar, there are 3 demands of the boycott, divestment, sanctions movement: to end the occupation and colonisation of Palestinian land that was invaded in 1967 during the conquest of the West Bank and Gaza and dismantling the apartheid wall there. Number 2, to recognise the rights of Palestinian civilians of Israel and to full equality. And number 3, to respect, protect and promote the rights of Palestinian refugees, of which there are roughly 5 million, those refugees of 1948 and 1967, to return home as stipulated in the United Nations Resolution 194. This is a peaceful movement. It looks at consumer, academic and cultural boycotts. These are all peaceful, totally acceptable means of withdrawing our support for what is an extremely brutal and oppressive regime. It isn't a case of opinion of what is happening in Palestine. The State of Israel is continuously breaking international law. The West Bank is, according to the United Nations, illegally occupied, and I don't think that that's something that I can stand over as a Labour Party activist, and I hope that the rest of the room feels the same way. There is the largest open-air prison, people surrounded by walls where they can't leave. We've seen stories of women giving birth at checkpoints because they haven't been allowed through to receive the adequate healthcare that we need. For the year that's in it, where we've cared for women in our own country, I think that it's necessary that we take a stand and don't allow that to happen to people overseas, because that's not right and that's not something that we should be allowing as a Labour Party. There are nearly 200 unarmed Palestinians have been killed already this year. There have been over 5,000 unarmed protesters injured by live fire by the IDF. This is a regime that people in Israel have been forced to become complicit in through the behaviour and the actions of politicians like Benjamin Netanyahu, and it's really important that we as spectators and observers from abroad take a stand and do what we can, which is to implement this peaceful objection to what is happening over there. There are 100,000 Jerusalemites cut off by the wall. This is illegal, and Israel has totally ignored demands of the international community to take a step back. There's increasing pressure from people who are trying to impose the kinds of politics that facilitate those atrocities onto people. So it is more important than ever now that we stand together as a Labour movement in solidarity with our comrades in Palestine and in solidarity with trade unions like my own SIPTU, which has already signed up to the VDS directive. So I hope that you will all support this motion.
Thank you, Chloe. Who's seconding the motion? Have we a seconder? I'll second it. Formally seconded. Thank you, Delegate. Now we have 2 addenda, or is it addendum? We have 2. We have one in the name of Dublin Central Constituency Council. Have we a mover for that? Have we a mover for that? Is somebody from Dublin Central Constituency Council prepared to go on record and formally move it? Yvonne.
Are they not already incorporated into it, Jack?
Well, this is the addendum.
That's the original motion, though.
This is the addendum.
They're incorporated into the sample.
Oh, yeah.
Comrades, I just want to first of all agree with what Chloe said so accurately about Palestine, and it's something I've been active on for a while. Eurovision, beloved to a lot of people, I know. I don't think we can support a Eurovision while children are being locked up in prison. I don't think that's something we can do. I don't think we can support Eurovision while there are peaceful protesters being shot. And I would hope, and I know that people who support the BDS campaign would hope, that we can have relations with Israel, we can, have the Eurovision hosted, but not while children are in prison, not while people are being shot. So that's why I'm proposing this addendum, and I hope that we can be active on this, and that we can say that no, we can't have, as I said, children in prison or peaceful protesters being shot. We can't do that. So that's why I'm proposing that Ireland would boycott the Eurovision this year. Thank you.
Thank you, Declan. It's been pointed out to me that that addendum is already incorporated in the composite, so it was procedurally an error on my part. I apologise to conference. We'll do another hour tomorrow afternoon for that. But so we have composite number 1 properly moved and seconded. Now motion 50 on human rights in Turkey. Yvonne, in the name of the Central Council.
Thank you very much, Chair. Yvonne O'Callaghan, Cork South Central, and member of the Central Council, moving motion 50. Comrades, in 2015, the Turkish government instituted a state of emergency, and within the last 3 years, until it has been lifted in the last few months, 170,000 workers have been dismissed from their jobs, the vast majority of them being public sector workers. 82,000 citizens have been arrested without due cause or due judicial process and languish in Turkish jails. 3,003 schools and universities have been shut down. Over 6,000 academics have lost their jobs, many for simply signing a petition asking for peace talks with the Kurdish people. 189 media outlets have been shut down and 319 journalists have been jailed. What do they all have in common? They support a Turkish state based on the values of democracy, secularism and equality. They are progressive democratic individuals who are members of the HDP party, trade unions and civil society, and they are opposed to the policies of the governing AKP party and President Erdogan. For workers who have been dismissed in the state of emergency, they have been blacklisted. They can never work again, either in the public sector or the private sector. They have not been entitled to any state assistance from the minute they have been dismissed into the future. And they are subjected to travel bans, which includes the cancellation of their passports, not only of them, but of their families, and they languish in poverty now. Moreover, comrades, the Turkish government has jailed more than 13 elected members of parliament of the pro-Kurdish democratic opposition, the HDP party, including their co-chairs, and has taken direct control of 82 municipalities, suspending, incarcerating elected mayors and local public representatives. Given the importance of the HDP's struggle not only to the international left and to democracy, but to peace in a region devastated by conflict, we now need to step up the solidarity efforts. It is clear, comrades. I commend this motion to conference. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Yvonne. Is there a seconder? It's formally seconded. Thank you, delegates. On motion 51 in the name of the Central Council, Dominic.
Thank you, Chairman. Good afternoon. Dominic Hannigan, Meath East representative on the Central Council. Colleagues, we'll all be aware from our TV screens of the migrant crisis that exists across the world, whether it's people fleeing from Guatemala up through Central America to the US, or people from Africa making their way across the Mediterranean waters to the sanctuary of Europe, or whether it's the Rohingya fleeing persecution in Burma. People are moving because of persecution and because of fear. They want to find a safe place for themselves and their families. And how we deal and respond to this crisis defines our level of humanity. Countries such as our own in Ireland, we understand this issue in our souls because of our history. So too do others. Germany was exemplary in taking in over 1 million refugees over the last couple of years. And we need to work with countries like that. We need to meet the challenge at a European level and at an international level, because no country can deal with this issue on their own, and no country can close its borders to the issue either. Membership of the European Union bestows many advantages on us all. Freedom of movement, freedom of expression, economic prosperity. But colleagues, it brings responsibilities too, and frankly, the response from Fine Gael's continental cousins in the European People's Party in places like Hungary under Viktor Orban, that's disgraceful. And it's time for the EPP to kick these people out. They've had enough. They've had their chance. They haven't responded to pressure. They need to be kicked out, and I hope next week we'll see them do just that, because thankfully our allies in the PES, we've been very clear about this. We said that this answer and this crisis must be dealt with by people working together and by sharing responsibilities across nation states. We will take action on this. We will end direct provision. We will legislate to make hate speech a crime. We will legislate against xenophobia. And we'll address the root causes of the whole issue of the refugee crisis. That will include things like the arms trade, climate change and poverty. And that will be our answer from the Labour Party and from the PES. And to those out there who want to use this crisis to divide us, to those who want us to fail, we say to them, you can keep your hatred. We don't want it. That's not our way. Last month, Ireland had a chance to listen to the vision and the values of President Michael D. Higgins and compare them to the empty rhetoric and false promises of others. Well, last weekend, we gave our answer, colleagues. We're a nation of inclusivity. We're a nation made stronger by the depths of our differences. We're straight, we're trans, we're Corkmen, we're Dubliners, we're Presbyterian, we're Muslims, we're Jews, we're Catholic, we're stay-at-home mums, we're travellers, we're Irish, we're all Irish, and we're better off together and stronger for it. Colleagues, I recommend this motion to the House. Thank you.
Thank you, Dominic. Is there a seconder for the motion? Formally seconded. Thank you, delegates. Now, motions number 49, which is composite number 1, motion number 50, and motion number 51 are before the floor of the speakers. Chairman.
Delegates, comrades, Dermot Manning, Jim Larkin, Branch Ballantyre, Dublin Rathdown. I just want to speak in reply to motion number 49, in particular about the aspect of boycotting the Eurovision next year. The motion as it currently reads is that the boycott should be if Israel proceeds with proposals to host the Eurovision in Jerusalem. Well, that decision has been made. It's not been held in Jerusalem, it's been held in Tel Aviv. Eurovision itself, I believe, is an event which over 60 years has actually preached inclusivity. It's not a political event. Ireland has participated now for nearly over 50 years and has participated with honour. I believe that by engaging in these events, by going to the contest next year, Ireland can shine a light. Our participation will help shine a light on issues over in Israel, and I think the fact that it's in Tel Aviv itself, almost uniquely amongst the Middle Eastern countries, is a city with a very large LGBT population, as the biggest Pride festival in the Middle East takes place there as well. I believe that boycott would send the wrong signal. I believe that Ireland should participate, and therefore I think this motion, this aspect of the motion, I do not support, and I would ask conference not to support it either. Thank you.
Thank you, Dermot. Now, you wanted to speak, delegate?
All right. I'm Oisin Tiernan, Wexford Branch, Wexford constituency. Now, in the context of this, I feel the addendum is not necessary in the context, as was said before, of the Eurovision. I feel like I cannot condone, of course, the actions of the Israeli government against the Palestinians. I feel that's completely wrong. But I think a cultural boycott is not necessary in this circumstance, especially in the context of the Eurovision itself, which we have such a rich history in. We've participated for the past 60 years and won it 7 times. So to pull out of it just because of the hosting would be completely, well, just throwing a baby out with the bathwater. The original motion does state that we should boycott the event as it's being hosted in Jerusalem, a city in dispute, but no part of this event will be hosted in the city. It's all being hosted in Tel Aviv, as was said before. But why is a boycott necessary? This is meant to be an event for it's meant to bring unity and bring Europe together. And to refuse to participate because the host country is completely unfair. It'll worst affect the European broadcasting unions and not the Israeli government. We sent Jedward to the contest in 2012 in Azerbaijan, known human rights abusers. There was never an issue before. Like in 2004, we participated in Turkey, who has been stated in the motion before, subject the Kurds to such hell. So why would we start with Israel? To conclude, yes, of course, I urge you to vote for the original motion, but I cannot agree with the addendum. We can have an effect with a financial boycott, but this partial cultural boycott is quite frankly unnecessary. Thank you.
Any further speakers?
Hello everyone, Jack Merriman, Holt Sutton Branch. I'd like to speak in favour of Motion 49 because I think that it's very important that we do put it forward. Because the fact is that boycott, divestment and sanctions isn't just trying to make a fuss about something, it has practical effects. It really provides practical incentives for the human rights abusers to change their ways. Because there has been effect so far. There's been multi-million dollar contracts terminated in Israel, and I think that this has had a very practical effect. And because Israel does have elections, it means that the government is beheld to political opinion. And if sanctions start causing an adverse effect in Israel, then the government must change its ways to make sure that people in Israel are doing okay. So in that context, we must acknowledge that boycott, divestment and sanctions provides a practical economic incentive to Israel. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Jack. Are there any further speakers? Joanna?
I just walked in the door, so I'm not very prepared, but I suppose I wanted to make the point that we had this debate a few years ago, and in fact, at the time, Michael D. Higgins was our foreign affairs spokesperson, and he basically said, and Princess Rossa agreed, that for tactical reasons, we shouldn't have a boycott of Israel, and we rejected a motion. We passed a very critical motion in relation to Israel at the time, and I myself, I'm absolutely opposed to boycotts in relation to Israel, but I am totally critical of the actions taken by the Israeli state. I totally disagree with them. I condemn and abhor many of their actions, but I just think in terms of, and I noticed that the Eurovision thing is brought into it, apart from anything else, it's a song contest. You know, it's not some kind of state event. You know what I mean? If it was okay for us to be in the Eurovision this year when Israel were participating, why would we boycott it just because they won? You know, it's totally contradictory. And will we be back in the Eurovision next year, you know, when it's in a different country? I think we need to engage with the Israelis. We have a very bad history in relation to the treatment of the Jewish people in Europe. They were wiped out in many European countries. If you look at Eastern European countries in particular, and look at basically the whole of the Jewish culture in Europe was practically eradicated, you know, thanks to the Holocaust and the aftermath, and before that, the treatment of Jewish people. So I think we need to engage. We need to try and bring both parties. We should be very supportive of the Palestinians and look for a two-state solution, and I don't think a boycott is the answer. Thank you.
That was Joanna Tuffy from Lucan Branch. Willie Hamilton wants to speak.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, comrades. I don't intend speaking on this. I fully support the motion that is put to the floor. And I just want to remind people that are apologists for the Israeli state and their fascist treatment of the Palestinian people, that the same excuses was made in South Africa by the rugby players at the time. Let's not forget that. Thank you.
So, any further speakers offering? Yes. So I'll let Andrew speak first.
Thank you, Chair. Comrades, it was once said, and this is in relation to our apparent failures to boycott the Eurovision in Azerbaijan and Turkey. It was once said, just because you can't do everything, it doesn't mean that you should do nothing. And I support composite number 1, motion 49, because we should stand in solidarity with those who are being oppressed. It should hurt people. It should absolutely hurt people when you are bullying them, when you are showing them that you are showing solidarity with the victims of continuous violence, of starvation, of humiliation, of disgusting sanctions put on them because of the actions of a minority. We should absolutely stand in solidarity with these people, and that even should include a cultural boycott of the state that is actually doing these things to these people. And I would like you to support the motion. Thank you very much, comrades.
Thank you, Andrew.
Brian Aylward, Northern Ireland delegate. Sorry to hog the microphone. I know I spoke last night. I want to speak very, very, very strongly in support of motion 49. A number of people have made the comments about why we didn't boycott the Eurovision when Azerbaijan and when Turkey hosted it. There's a very big difference, and people are asking the question, why the Israelis? I'll tell you a very big difference between the Israelis and the Turkish state and the Azerbaijan state. Turkey and Azerbaijan don't claim to be the only democracies in their region. Israel does. And the arguments being put forward by Joanna Tuffy and others are the same clapped-out arguments that have always been put in opposition to boycotts in the past. They were the same arguments that were used by Margaret Thatcher in opposition to boycott of South Africa. They were the same arguments that were used in opposition to boycotts of Indonesia in view of their illegal, illegitimate and immoral occupation of East Timor. And in the same way as those arguments were wrong then in the case of South Africa and East Timor, they're wrong now. Comrades, it is very timely that we are debating this motion in 2018. And I want to echo all the points that have been made by other speakers in supporting and putting forward this motion. But I think it would be wrong of me not to go off the platform today without reminding members that this year marks the 100th anniversary of the Balfour Declaration, which has had many consequences for the people in Palestine. And it is also, which followed 3 years after the Sykes-Picot Agreement of 1915, which determined many of the modern borders of the Middle East. It is the 70th anniversary of the Nakba, which many Palestinians refer to as the period in which the Israeli state came into being. Nakba is the Arabic word for the catastrophe. And it is also important that we're debating this issue in the context of the fact that Dáil Éireann unanimously passed a motion in 2014 to support the recognition of Palestine, something which has not been followed through at ministerial level. And I would like to use this platform as an opportunity to call on the government to follow through at ministerial level what was actually agreed in 2014. So please support this motion in the true spirit of international solidarity that has served this party so well over the years. Thank you.
Thank you, Brian.
Dennis Vaughan from North Clare. I strongly support this motion. Israeli forces are basically terrorising the people of Gaza, Palestine, etc. Terrorism doesn't work by other states. Look at the black and tans in this very country. Cultural boycotts do work. It worked in South Africa. It'll work in Israel. We must force the Israeli government to start peace talks immediately. They refuse to speak, and hopefully bring peace between the two peoples. Bombing hell out of Gaza does not work, and it's not right. Let's boycott. Let's have a cultural boycott of Israel. Thank you.
Now, we are now approaching an hour behind time, so I think that we've had a very good exchange of views on this crucial issue, and I'm going to invite Senator Ivana Bacik, who is the spokesperson, to respond to all of the debate on these motions. Ivana Bacik, comrades.
Gurmagat Jack, comrades and friends, thank you to all of you who took the time to speak, to put forward motions and to speak today on foreign affairs issues. The speeches, I think, brought out what is best about Labour Party conference, and I've been coming to conferences now for more years than I care to remember, so it's great to hear the passion and the eloquence that so many of you brought to the debate. I should say that I am the Labour Party representative on the Oireachtas Foreign Affairs Committee, and on your behalf I have there been raising issues on Palestinian rights, indeed on the rights of those in Turkey who are so badly being treated currently by the Erdogan government, and indeed we've also been raising, all of us on your behalf in the Shannon and Dáil, the need for a just and fair and equal migration policy, all of the issues that are addressed in these motions 49 to 51 today. In addition, I've been raising issues around the Syrian war and conflict, and more recently around the brutal killing of Jamal Khashoggi by Saudi Arabia. I would urge you, comrades, to support all three motions, and I want to just speak briefly about composite number 1. And I would say this, that the vote is on composite number 1, not on the addendum, and therefore the call is for support for the boycott, divestment and sanction campaign, which I have personally supported, as have many in the PLP for many years now. I should say that the Labour Party has a stated policy of a two-state solution, a negotiated peace and a two-state solution. Eamon Gilmore, as Taoiseach Minister for Foreign Affairs, stood up strongly for the rights of Palestinians, and I think we have a strong track record on this. In addition, the Irish government has committed over the years millions in aid to the rebuilding of Palestinian homes destroyed by Israeli Defence Forces. We've seen US President Trump reducing the US commitment to UNRWA, the UN relief agency in Gaza, and the illegally settled territories, by €360 million. So we know that there is immense need in Palestine. We know that the policy of demolition and of illegal settlements has destroyed the homes and lives of many Palestinians, and we do need to take a stance. And I would strongly urge you, colleagues, to support Composite 1. And I would say this, it is conditional in terms of the boycott of Eurovision, and I would always bow to Dermot Manning's superior knowledge of the Eurovision, but I would say this, that the call in Composite 1 is to boycott if Israel proceeds to host Eurovision in Jerusalem. And as we all know, there have been huge international calls against and condemnation of Trump's action in proposing to move the US embassy to Jerusalem. Jerusalem is contested, as we know, and we need to take a strong stance on that. In addition, in the Shannon, my colleagues Aon, Kevin and Jed and I have taken a strong stance in supporting Senator Francis Black's bill prohibiting import of goods produced in the occupied territories. So I think we have a strong policy. We need to build on that, and I would urge you to support our colleagues in the trade union movement in supporting the BDS campaign, supported by so many peace activists in Israel also. And I think I think the other speakers have put the support for Composite number 1 very eloquently indeed. Finally, I just want to say that I think what all three motions have in common, in urging you to support all three have in common, as Dominic put it so strongly, a strong affirmation of our socialist politics, of international solidarity, of standing up for justice for the oppressed, of standing up for equality, of putting forward a positive vision of solidarity, and of condemning the bitter, divisive politics of hate that we've seen unfortunately come to the fore across so many countries in recent years. So as our President, re-elected President Michael D. Higgins put it so strongly and eloquently in his own speech last weekend, we need to stand firm, to stand positively for a politics of solidarity. We need to condemn the rise in racism, to condemn a rise in anti-Semitism across the world, to stand in solidarity with the people in Pittsburgh, the victims of such a brutal anti-Semitic attack last week in their synagogue as they prayed. And I think we need to stand for equality and for solidarity. And in that spirit, comrades, I would urge you to support all three motions. Gur maith agat go leor.
So, thank you, Ivana. So now we're going to vote on these three motions. And we're voting first on composite number 1. Are our tellers in the room, by the way? All here? All here, Dermot? Okay. All in favour of composite number 1, please show. All against? Abstentions? It's very clear. I declare composite motion number 1 carried. Thank you, delegates. So now, motion number 50. All in favour, please show. All against? I declare motion 50 carried. And motion number 51. All in favour, please show. All against? I declare the motion carried. And now we're going